Wing, wing.
Wing, wing. Hello, I'm David Harrelson. I'm an associate pastor at God's Shining Light Church, and we're going to be talking today to Dr. Margo Bush and Senior Pastor Dixie Pebworth, and we're going to be talking about a business that Dr. Margo Bush started a few years ago called Don't Do Church Alone. And I think that this is a very needed business. I think churches are struggling, trying to grow, reaching a cap or a ceiling and not being able to break through that ceiling. And just from what I've seen, I've been very impressed with Dr. Margo Bush and what she's been able to do with the church that I attend and pastor at, which is God's Shining Light Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, under Senior Pastor Dixie Pebworth. And so at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Margo Bush and let her tell you a little bit about Don't Do Church Alone. And then we're going to get some feedback from Pastor Dixie about how that program has been working here at God's Shining Light. So without further ado, Dr. Margo Bush, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you started this business.
Well, that's always interesting because, it's like God just tells you to do something and you keep saying no and no and no. I'm not the person, and you find yourself 3 days in the belly of the well. You know what I mean by that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Is that you don't want to, because God's not going to change his mind. He has a plan, and I didn't really see it at the time. I was a pastor's wife for 28 years and loved serving as what I say, second in command, because you could just do whatever God called you to do, and then it was all his fault if something happened. So we just had a great, my late husband, Reverend Bill Bush, went on to be with the Lord when I was 49. We had pastored several churches and taught in Bible schools and across the country, and then settled and taught here at a international Bible school here in Tulsa, Oklahoma for years. But I really saw that the churches were needing help, just like we did. And I began to feel the tug of the Lord saying, I want you to go help some pastors. And I kept saying, I'm not the one. There's so many more that, you know how that is.
Oh, yeah.
That are better. But after a little bit of that, tug on your shoulder, and you're not going to get him to say no. And the Lord is always, he knows what he's doing. And so over the past couple of years now, I have begun to coach churches and help churches. I'm a natural coach anyway. I coach business owners and entrepreneurs, and I felt like that we always called ourselves counselors in a church, but really what we were is coaches.
Right.
We didn't have our degree. We were coaches. And so I settled in and began to teach some and help some pastors begin to grow, and they began to grow, and that's what found me here at God's Shining Light Church with Pastor Dixie.
Okay, so let's. That's a good transition point right there. Let's go to Pastor Dixie. And Dixie, how did you first make contact with Dr. Margo Bush?
Well, that's a good question. I think I met her at that time at City Elders, and I found out that she does a program called Don't Do Church Alone. And during that time, I was looking for some structure. I was looking for some things to help the church begin to grow again and get over COVID. I mean, there's a lot of things that happened in the last 5 years that,
yes.
A lot of churches lost their systems. They lost their ability to grow and their outreach. And so, and in talking to Miss Dr. Bush, she began to share with me some areas that she felt that she could come in and help the church to begin to grow again.
What were some of those areas, Dr. Bush, that you felt like your program could immediately bring benefit to God's Shining Light?
Well, the biggest thing that churches have a problem with understanding is that even though we're a spiritual entity, there is a part of business that is involved in every church.
Right.
And when you go to seminary or when you go to Bible school, they don't teach you that part. They teach you how to preach, how to outreach, how to go and minister to people, do funerals, do weddings, but they don't teach you that a church has got to have a structure and a business sense to it so that it can create the capacity that is in a pastor's vision. And so what I do is I come in and I help them see leadership, sometimes their staff, because most pastors, if they're like we were, we brought on people that could do a job and felt like that they wanted to help the church, but not all of them were qualified.
Really trained and qualified.
Really trained and qualified. But we didn't know that, and we didn't understand that.
As leaders of a church, you're needing volunteers. You
just need anybody. Anybody, please come help.
Right.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
You got so much going on. But then all of a sudden, and that's been great. Most of the pastors, I mean, they have really worked hard. There's nothing wrong with that. We worked hard to get where we were, but then in order, what I call the jump, they have to begin to make the jump. And they don't know how to do that.
Yeah. So, Pastor Dixie, where have you seen Don't Do Church Alone start to benefit God Shining Light?
Well, when we began to meet and began to train, one of the things that we dealt with was the systems that we no longer had in place. At one point in time, I had 24 deacons, and I had, systems in place. But over a period of time, we took a couple of turns, and the systems went away. We used to have a motorcycle ministry, and we let it go, and that was the ministry that really took over the systems as far as, ushering and security and children's areas and things like that. And so it was difficult to get people to volunteer. And one of the things that Dr. Bush introduced to us was the MCT, motivate, communicate, and train. Mm-hmm. And that was some of the things that we wasn't doing that we had to begin to implement and begin to put in place. Then also there's the part of the onboarding, learning how to get people from point A to point B to get them involved in what they want to do and answer the hope of their calling.
Right. I know just in the last few months, just some things that I've seen, I've seen a difference in the atmosphere walking into the church. I've seen a difference in the parking lot. Not only the parking lot personnel, but the number of vehicles in the parking lot.
Yeah, that's great.
And just maybe the ability to bring volunteers, staff, which now we no longer call volunteers, we now call them servant leaders, and that's probably due to the influence of Don't Do Church Alone. So talk about a few of those things that you've seen change over the last few months, both Dixie and Dr. Bush. I'd like to get your perspective on the changes that you've seen.
Well, I know there probably a year or two before, during COVID, I was put like that. We had no greeters at the door. We had nobody welcoming people in. We had no guest services. We had no direction for new people coming in. We would say hi to them, but that was about it. Yeah. And Dr. Bush has created a new visitors runway to where, when a new person comes in, we have the avenues of probably being greeted about 3 or 4 or 5 times before or when they hit the door. And then answer any questions that they may be having and really help them to feel accepted and comfortable in the church atmosphere. And that's, one of the ways that she's really helped out. We removed the ideal of volunteers and moved towards the ideals of servant leaders, that God really wants servants in his house and not just volunteers.
I really believe that God supplies and provides for his church. And I think that it's just in churches, they don't understand how to create an atmosphere even for servant leaders to thrive. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that we worked on here at God Shining Light Church is that, yes, there are people that want to serve. And I heard, I hear it from all churches, we don't have enough volunteers, And it's really not true. You do have volunteers. You have servant leaders. you've just not learned how to cultivate and create an atmosphere
Right.
for them to thrive in the church, and they really want to. They
Yeah.
want to serve. And so I think that the most exciting thing for me was on our first, Pastor, you remember you had set up a meetings, and we were going to do them for 3 or 4 weeks on a Sunday night, and for all the servant volunteers or all the people that wanted to volunteer become servant leaders. And there was like 100 that showed up.
There's a lot of people showing
It
up.
was like, I was just shouting on the inside, because really what it was is these are people that really want to serve in the house of God.
Correct.
They just don't know how.
Right.
And so once you cultivate, that's what Don't Do Church Alone does, is I teach how to create an atmosphere for people to volunteer, to serve, and really thrive.
Well, and it's probably needed across the board because a lot of churches start off small. The leaders, from the senior pastor on down to the rest of the leadership, probably or may not have any type of a business degree or education,
Right.
may not have been instructed in finance or staff organization skills, anything like that, how to cultivate leaders from volunteers and servant leaders. And so if somebody has a church and they feel like that they've grown to the point that they can't grow anymore, but they want to grow more, and they have a desire to get in contact with you, how would they do that?
Well, first of all, you can go to my website. It is margocoaches.com, margocoaches.com, or they can reach out to me at Dr. Margo, Dr. Margo, at margobush.com, or they can call me, and lots of pastors just call me. It's 405-492-2805. You can text me, you can call me, I answer.
That's awesome. Well, I know from standing back and I'm just observing and watching what's taking place, I've been very impressed.
Thank you, Dave.
And I think Pastor Dixie is pleased too with the growth that the church has seen. I think I've even heard you say we may have to go to a third service.
Well, yeah, we're probably within the next 6 months to a year going to have to go to a third service. And, I expect within the next 2 to 5 years to go up to 1,000 people, which would double our capacity where we're at now. And because we're setting the systems in place and we're motivating, we're communicating, we're training our staff and training our servant leaders to be involved in the church. And, we're not just throwing somebody in a classroom, we're teaching them how to teach before they even get in there.
Right.
And so that's what makes a difference.
Well, I can't think of a better endorsement than that. And so
Thank
with
you.
that, thank you for your time today. And you want to give out that phone number one more time in case somebody does want to call you?
I sure do. It's 405-492-2805, or they can email me at Dr. Margo, Dr. Margo, at margobush.com.
All right, and that's going to wrap. I'm David Harrelson, Associate Pastor at God's Shining Light Church. Thank you very much for listening, and stay tuned. There's going to be more good information you're going to hear about this business.